I think I'm losing my mind, trying to stay inside the lines.
This is Ida.
It's like you're running
Welcome
place.
to Celestial You.
How you keep staying the same. But baby, I get something different, and I'm okay with that. I can't fake no more smiles. That shit gon' drive me mad. I'm focused on the future, don't care about nothing else.
Hi guys, this is Ida from Celestial You. Here are some examples. I have two today of the Rahu return. If you go look at my website, I have a blog about this, and you can actually look at the different effects of the Rahu return, what to expect depending on the houses you're in. So for my Rahu return, it was happening in the 9th house, which is the house of the Dharmic path, higher education, foreign travel, culture, moral or spiritual beliefs. And in this house, when you're undergoing a Rahu return, you really have to sort of let go of your hobbies and focus your knowledge towards the bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve. That was definitely true for my Rahu return. So what I did is to cast a chart, I would search the transits using my birth location, and then you come up with the transit chart for the exact moment of your Rahu return. So for me, again, Rahu was returning into the 9th house. This is really all about higher education for me. I was about 6 months into my pre-pharmacy program. I was already in college, and I'd already committed to becoming a pharmacist at that point. This Rahu return, having Saturn here in Gemini, Saturn tends to sort of create separation wherever it's at. So in this case, it was essentially saying that I would have undergone a period of time where the focus would not have been discovery and Gemini type things, short trips or being able to seek the truth in any which way, because really there was an exaggerated sense of responsibility, duty here with Saturn. Saturn sitting almost right on top of Venus too, really tends to suppress any sort of relationships, because this house of Dharma, or our path, the 9th house, with Venus there and Rahu, that birth position is about discovering relationships, learning about healing, because Venus is the healer. And when Saturn comes across here, essentially it suppresses any sort of focus on relationships. And that was entirely true for me at 18 and a half or so, because I was in college and I hadn't done a great job of relationships. Usually the planet with your Rahu is a planet that you need to get better at. You're trying to improve. And so you really, at 18, during your first Rahu return, don't have any sort of expertise in this area. It's sort of embarrassing. And that's definitely where I was at that point. In addition to this, Saturn coming into this house sort of negates a lot of things. Saturn in my birth chart is in the 2nd house. It's really focused on creating income. And that's what I was focused on, becoming a pharmacist, creating income. And here too, Saturn rules the 4th cusp, which is the mother. And at the time, I was really concerned with making good money quickly. My mother had struggled with cancer, and I wanted to provide for her. And so that's really what Capricorn in this position, the 4th house, does. It wants to be the provider. So I really wasn't looking towards things that would fulfill my thirst for creativity, knowledge, that kind of thing, or divergent hobbies. I remember wanting to study Spanish, and I remember my father, who's the son here, really being against anything that would take me away from my core career. And also really suppressing Venus here, who would rather go out into the world and experience the world and the worldly pleasures of various different sorts, which is Gemini, and also the expansion of different knowledge. That wasn't possible for me at that time. And also, Gemini is ruled by Mercury here, and Mercury was definitely involved with planet Jupiter, higher education. This is in the third house of education. But because it's sort of opposite what's going on here with Saturn, there was definitely this idea I had at the time that it was an identity struggle for me, that I really wanted truth, and I didn't necessarily feel like what I was studying in pharmacy school was where I needed to be. So there was this discordance between my identity and what I was doing. But again, I was doing this for a valid reason, and it was going to further my career because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, and this is my career house. So, and of course, it was going to be a career of some sort, healing and interacting with the public to some degree as a pharmacist. So that was something that I was concentrating on at the time. And so if you read the transit chart, the focus here, if you look at the ruler of the ascendant here, is in the third house, and there's 4 planets here. So this time frame was all about learning for me, and it was because Venus here in the third house with all these other planets, it wasn't an easy experience in the pre-pharmacy program that I was. And I remember it being a major struggle, which is this 8th house that is ruled by Venus. But ultimately, it was foundational in forming my identity, and that's really what this shows. It also shows that dharmically, or in terms of the path that we're on in life, Saturn was at the forefront here with Rahu. So, you know, again, we're talking about a time in my life where I did what I thought was right. I did what I thought was my duty, and particularly my duty to my family. 4th house ruled by Saturn here in Capricorn. And, you know, the experience was not necessarily about being able to grow in terms of relationships at all, because the focus here with Venus was really goal-oriented in Sagittarius, and it had more to do with just learning this professional career. And then this really did further my career in general, though, because in this 10th house, you can see that Jupiter is exalted here with the moon. It really furthered my ability to learn the science that I needed to learn, and learn this form of healing and wisdom that comes from pharmacy. And that's really what the focus was on this return. So that's it for the transit chart there. If you do look at the 7th house of relationships, you can see that it was ruled by Mars. And so the way that I was creating my self-expression was entirely related to career, related to things that would allow me to assert myself better. But in order to do that, I needed to create essentially a form of income. Oh God, let's cut that. And really this income is about putting effort here in the house of intelligence, expanding my own intelligence. Aquarius is also related to intelligence in a very structured way, within a very structured career in order to make income. And so that's really all that was happening here. The focus was definitely not, with K2 here, the focus could not be relationships or dating or anything like that. So almost exclusively during this period, I was not involved in any sort of dating, and you can clearly see that the focus was very different. It was very academic. Okay, and now we're going to look at our second chart, and this happens to be one of my sisters. Her Rahu return occurred in the 6th house, so if you go to my website, you can see the blog article I've written on Rahu returns. And if you go down to the very bottom, you can find this chart to look at your own chart, and her Rahu return occurred in the 6th house. So this was about her pulling away from the big picture, idealism, escapism, and really turning things into organized work, overcoming her obstacles, outproducing her competitors, and really getting her health on track. So this was the goal here. In addition to that, her particular sign that for the Rahu is in Cancer. So my sister was going through a time frame where she had tried to get pregnant for 3 years and really struggled with that, really struggled with her health. And you can see that because achieving this is sort of at odds with Saturn, which can create illness. And ultimately, though, this was a very difficult journey for her because she was dealing with mental health issues in terms of, not being able to get pregnant, thinking it was her fertility. It was not her fertility. There's a lot that she learned in this process. But ultimately, there were a couple things that happened during this return that were notable. And one is, you could see here the sun is in the 2nd house. So this is really a nod towards family. And then another thing you can see here is that we've got Venus exalted in Pisces, and we've got Mercury there. So at this very time, during this exact moment of her return, she landed a contract with Walmart for her product development company, and they really just exploded. And you can see that because this is the 2nd house, and the wealth is the sun, and that is in her over her 2nd cusp here. And of course, anything in Aries really shows entrepreneurship. This is her entrepreneurial company that just did amazingly well. At the same time, she also at this very time was finally pregnant. So she was finally going to have her family after years of trying and having difficulties with her health and and things like that. So that is what happened there. If you look at the transit chart in particular, you can very clearly see that the issue with Saturn in the 12th house is really showing up. I mean, it is said that when Saturn transits your 12th house, that if you have been working really hard on something, you can actually see it be granted. And so in this case, Saturn is actually the ruler of her ascendant, so the ruler of her chart. And that is exactly what happened. She had been working so hard on getting healthy so that she could have a child. And you can see here, this is the second house. And not only does this represent, her career and income and things like that, because you can see that on the cusp with here. But another thing you can see is that this has to do with her family. In fact, her Charakarka of children is Mercury, and her Darakarka of spouse, they're in the same house. And you see, because Venus is exalted and Mercury is actually not debilitated in this at this degree, it really gets a boost here from Venus, and it's essentially saying that this is the time in which she would have her family as well. And if you want to see how the experience would be for that, you just look here at the fifth cusp, and you can see that it's still a very emotional situation with her family and having her children. And it was going to be emotional. It was going to be not an easy birth. This kind of harkens to the fact that Mars is there, so the birth would not be super easy here. But ultimately, she's going towards creating her family, and so ultimately it is successful, and she does get to do that. But again, because it's part of her path in life, but it's not an easy one. It wasn't an easy birth. She ended up having a very difficult labor and was in the hospital, was actually ended up having to get antibiotics. I mean, it was prolonged, and she ended up also having to have surgery. So you can kind of see all of this in this chart over here. But ultimately, with Jupiter in Sagittarius, this 18-month period with her Rahu return was very successful. She did end up gaining a child out of it. And she really overcame her illness, her physical illnesses, or the things that were keeping her from having kids, being able to fix the things, the timing, everything that was going on with her own body in order to make this happen. And so that's the second example of the Rahu return. So by looking at not only the house placement, but also the sign placement, you can get an idea of what you would be going through if you're going through your Rahu return. Okay, thanks for joining me. Bye.
1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'm losing my mind, trying to stay inside the lines. It's like you're running in place. Yeah. How you keep staying the same. Yeah. But baby, I get something different, and I'm okay with that. I can't fake no more smiles. That shit gon' drive me mad. I'm focused on the future, don't care about nothing else. by myself.